Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the youngster Kevin Cunningham, or otherwise you can find him on Twitter at Kid Cunny. So what's going on down in the great state of Florida today, Kevin?
The great state of Florida today has about 70-degree weather. Yesterday it was in the 50s and cloudy, so it was absolutely freezing. As you know, the 50s are absolutely freezing. And today we're back in the 70s, so things are good. How about you?
Hey, 50 degrees is like a heat wave, and we're on with that 50 today up here in Pennsylvania. It actually feels like a spring day. Like
there you go.
Today is like hoodie day, and I am a hoodie guy. I know that I have a job during the week that requires me to wear professional dress clothes. But a casual old man Troy loves to wear the hoodie, a baseball cap and a hoodie, and that is what I see when I look outside today. I wish I could be out there. But today is, to me, hoodie weather. I love it. If it stayed this way all year, I might be in heaven. So that's what's going on. Look how excited you got me going today.
Talk about the weather and you get excited.
Yeah, so that just probably means I'm getting old. But I'll tell you what, Kevin, we got a great show today. Of course, there was this thing called the Super Bowl yesterday. So I know we talked Big Ten, but there was some Big Ten representation going on in that Super Bowl yesterday. So we're going to tie the Super Bowl into our show today because it is Go Big or Go Home. I know we're all basically basketball, but there's some Super Bowl representation in the Big Ten yesterday. We're going to talk about that. Top 25 shakeup, Kevin. Holy cow. We talk about our show, Go Big or Go Home, and it seems like the top 10, they all went home. They went home miserable because the top 10 had a number of upsets last week. We're going to talk about that. Then, of course, we're going to talk about the Big Ten. We're going to look at last week's games. We're going to look at the games coming up. And then we're going to talk about the Twitter poll last week, and we'll do that near the end of the show. We'll talk about the Twitter poll from last week, the results, and the new Twitter poll that's going up. Before I get into that, though, Kevin, got to let people know how to get in touch with us. You can find me, Old Man Troy, at TroyRobert967 on Twitter, or the youngster Kevin Cunningham. Go follow him on Twitter, at Kid Cunny. So with that said, Kevin, let's go right into the Super Bowl. I know you do some work on the NFL. So it must have been an intriguing game for you. I'm hearing today everybody's talking about the greatest Super Bowl of all time. I disagree that it was the greatest of all time. Maybe the greatest comeback of all time. Not the greatest game to me. But what are your thoughts when you look at this game? Atlanta, many people thought the game was over. I was watching social media. People were packing it in, giving Atlanta the trophy, and then there goes New England, doing what New England does, doesn't give up, and they overcome a 25-point deficit. What are your thoughts?
Well, yeah, it was incredible. I mean, you mentioned that I do some work with the NFL stuff, and I was working during the Super Bowl writing on a Big Ten site. That's something I commonly do every weekend, and it's a college football site. And so, you got your Tom Brady's in there with Michigan and James White for Wisconsin, and those two guys obviously led the way for the 25-point comeback in the Super Bowl. It's ridiculous to say out loud. It's one thing to sit there and watch it by yourself or with your wife or your friends, and you watch it and you're in awe. But then you talk about it and you say that the New England Patriots came back from 25 points down. The Falcons were the 8th highest scoring offense in the league history. Okay, so you got this superpower offense. They're up 21-3 at half. They're up 28-3 in the third quarter. And then all of a sudden, Tom Brady throws the ball 62 times in this game. 62 passing attempts for Tom Brady in this game. 466 yards, just 2 touchdowns. James White had a couple rushing. But so, 28-3 comeback midway through the third quarter. I guess there are a couple narratives with this game as far as you mentioned, and I completely agree with you that people say this is the best Super Bowl ever and this is the best football game that they've ever seen, and I completely disagree. It was an amazing game, but for a quarter and a half, Atlanta was up 7-0, and there wasn't much offense going on, and there wasn't much activity going on. So for the first quarter and a half, I was it was interesting seeing how Atlanta's top flight offense was getting shut down and how Tom Brady was getting shut down, but it wasn't captivating. It wasn't entertaining. It was just interesting from a football nerd's perspective to see how this was happening. Then, the final 20 or so minutes of the game, as far as game time goes, was obviously exciting and interesting. I don't think it was the best game ever. I think that's a topic going around sports shows this morning. Was this the best game ever? Was this the best Super Bowl game ever? Does this mark Tom Brady as the best quarterback ever? To me, going into this game, Tom Brady was the best quarterback ever. This just sealed it. Ultimately, Atlanta, again, had a 28-3 lead. This will be my last point, and I'll kick it off to you. But Atlanta had a 28-3 lead with just over 8 minutes left in the third quarter. And for the rest of the game, and I tweeted this out, that, Atlanta's got a big lead at halftime. They've got the best running back duo in the league in Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman. They can just eat up the clock the rest of the way. Their running backs are, like I said, the best duo in the league. They can run the clock out, basically. And so Atlanta, from the 8-minute mark on, from the third quarter, up 28-3, ran the ball a total of 4 times. They ran the ball 4 times when you're up by 25 points in the Super Bowl midway through the third quarter. You ran it 4 more times the rest of the game. And ultimately, that's, to me, is what made the difference. Time is certainly on your side if you're Atlanta and you want to waste it, and you run the ball 4 times. Matt Ryan completed 17 of his 23 passes, and the 2 running backs carried the ball for a total combined 18 times. Atlanta ran, I think it was 46 plays, and New England ran 93 plays. Again, Tom Brady threw it 62 times. Atlanta had 46 total plays. So that's, to me, if you're Atlanta, you lost the game because of your decision-making the last, I think it was, 23 minutes in change. From the midway point in the third quarter on, you lost the game, not just because of your defense allowing Tom Brady to completely carve you up, but your decision-making as a coaching staff on how to attack the rest of the game.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was like I was trying to figure this out while I was watching the game, Kevin. Were they trying to make a record and score the most points in the Super Bowl by continuously passing the ball? I am a Packer fan, and I saw it twice this year what the Falcons can do that running game. And the thing is, Kevin, they were having success running the ball. It's not like they were getting shut down. I know that right out of the gate in the second half. New England came out, and this, to me, this is when I thought the game was over. It wasn't at halftime. But when New England came out, got a 3-and-out, I thought to myself, okay, here they go. They just got a 3-and-out, and that's hard to do against Atlanta. I'm like, they got a 3-and-out. They're getting the ball near midfield. Here you go. New England's going to come back. Then the Falcon defense went out, and no points were scored by New England. And now the doubt came in like, well, if they can't capitalize on this good field position, this game is over. And then Atlanta goes out, and you know what, Kevin? I know that you have Julio Jones, and I know you have Matt Ryan, and Julio Jones made a fantastic catch. But to me, at that point, and I don't think it's getting conservative, you call plays, you're already in field goal range, do not drop back and pass. Because there's only 2 things that are going to happen. Well, there's 3 things that can happen when you drop back and pass. 1 is you can get intercepted. But 2, you can get sacked or a holding penalty. And what do the Falcons do? They get 2 of them back-to-back, a sack and then a holding penalty. Not just 1, they got both. Why are you doing that? Because you're in field goal range, and now if you kick a field goal and you go up by 11, there's no tie. There's no tie at all. And I know people say, well, you want to have aggressive play calling. There's a difference between being aggressive and making bad decisions. There's a big difference. I don't think anybody in the world would have blamed the Falcons if they ran the ball 3 times for 2 yards and kicked a field goal. I don't think anybody would have. Plus, in the meantime, you're going to make New England use a timeout, waste timeouts, or if they don't, you're going to run time off the clock. So I thought it was just crazy play calling. Like, I thought after the the sack, well, now you may have to pass because you got to get yardage, and that's what they did. And then, of course, there's a holding call, and it was an evident holding call. Wasn't one of those iffy ones. I mean, he really had a wrap around his neck. But I just think that decision-making there on that last part of it, I was scratching my head. Because after Julio Jones made that catch, Kevin, I thought for sure that game, basically, you can put the nail in the coffin right now. And I guess they wanted to really put the nail in the coffin. They wanted to pass. They wanted to score a touchdown, put it really out of reach. But I'll tell you what, Kevin, 11 points, that would have been enough in my book. What are your quick thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're hitting it on the head. That final 3.5 minutes, I mean, you went through the complete sequence of it perfectly, and I completely agree. I mean, ultimately, if I'm the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons and there's 3:30 on the clock and the Patriots have their timeouts and you're on the 20-yard line, I kneel the ball 3 times. I don't even care about running it and getting first downs and touchdowns, and I don't care about that. I kneel the ball 3 times because you know at that point you're not going to lose it, and you're setting up a Matt Bryant field goal from 40 yards out, and you're up by 11. There's 3.5 left. The Patriots would be out of their timeouts by then because they would have used all of them. And ultimately, what you're asking the rest of the game, you're telling the rest of the game, okay, there's 3.5 minutes left. We're up by 11. We kick the ball off. The Patriots have the ball. 0 timeouts. They have to go the length of the field, and then they have to successfully get an onside kick, which basically never happens, essentially, and they have to score, again, another touchdown. So if those are your odds with 3.5 minutes left and forcing the Patriots to have no timeouts to score the ball twice and recover an onside kick, I think I take my chances at that point if I'm Atlanta. I'm not throwing the ball. I'm not even running the ball. I'm literally kneeling it because that ensures absolutely nothing is going to happen. No running back is going to fumble it. There's not going to be a botched snap. You just kneel it. You kill the Patriots' timeouts, and you force an incredible series of events to start happening in order for you to lose. And that's, I mean, essentially what Atlanta did was the exact opposite and called passing plays. And I don't know, like we mentioned, it was just bad decision-making. There's no other way to go about it. And I think that the Patriots' defense has to be applauded because Atlanta was up 28-3. Like I said, the 8th highest scoring offense in NFL history, up 28-3, and New England just completely shuts them down. And from that point on, New England's defense dominated, and Tom Brady dominated.
Yeah, and I want to add something here, Kevin. You know, I know you never want to take your foot off the gas, and you want to keep trying to score points, and I get that because that's the argument that I hear is that, well, you know, you can never let up on the Patriots. Yeah. But if you just listen to what you and I talked about, there's a difference between doing what they did, say it was early in the third quarter or midway through the third quarter. You're talking about the end of the game when those 3 points would have basically sealed the game. So I got to ask you this, Kevin. This is the other debate going on. Is this the biggest Atlanta Falcons collapse or is it the biggest comeback for New England? That's the thing. Do you call it a collapse or do you call it a great comeback? I think it's a combination of both.
That's typically how I go about it. I mean, you know, in order for a team to collapse, the other team has to capitalize on every single mistake that you throw out there. And when you're down 25 points in the third quarter in the Super Bowl, you know, I don't care how much you collapse. You have to take advantage of those situations, and that's what Brady and that offense did. And, again, I fully commend the Patriots defense for, again, shutting down an all-time great offense. You know, you mentioned the running game was getting it going throughout the entire game. Devontae Freeman averaged 6.8 yards per carry. Tevin Coleman averaged over 4. Matt Ryan completed 17 of his 23 passes, didn't throw a pick. So it's not as though Atlanta's offense suddenly, you know, pooed the bed. And they were playing football, and they just weren't scoring points. New England's defense was shutting them down and getting the stops that they needed. And ultimately, bad decision-making was the difference. You know, it was a complete collapse by Atlanta's, I think, coaching staff more than the offensive personnel. You know, it's one thing to not put up points, but it's another to put your team in bad situations on the field. You know, I don't think Matt Ryan choked the game away. I think he didn't necessarily have a great opportunity to win it, and frankly, he shouldn't have had the ball in his hands for most of it. It should have been the running backs. Like I said, 4 carries the last 23 minutes of the game, you're up by 25 points. Why are you running the ball 4 times the rest of the game? It should have been 14 at least. You know, you need to run the ball in that situation. So Atlanta, to me, Atlanta's coaching staff choked it away more so than the players. Obviously, the defense had something to do with it as well, not being able to stop Brady. But as much of a choking job as it was by the coaching staff offensively, and, you know, the defense just couldn't contain Brady. They couldn't get after him anymore. I was impressed with the Falcons' speed on defense. People talked about that before the game. I think they were flying all over the field. They were getting after Brady the first 2.5 quarters. After that, it went away. But so as much as I, you know, throw shade at Atlanta's coaching staff for the decision-making, you have to give props to the Patriots. So I'm with you that it goes both ways.
Yeah, it really does. And when you look at, you know, the game overall, Kevin, and you look at that offensive line and Matt Ryan, I mean, it's not like he threw – I mean, you look at Tom Brady, he threw a pick 6. You know, I know Matt Ryan, people say, well, you know, the sack, the strip. Well, the coaching staff puts the quarterback in those situations, you know, by the play calling that is made. So, you know, like I said, it was an exciting game. It was a very exciting game for the last quarter. But up to that point, I mean, there was a point, Kevin, where I was thinking about going and snoozing. Just saying, you know, this game is not exciting to watch. And, you know, the last quarter made it pretty exciting. But, you know, you look at James White, the former Badger, Tom Brady giving him props this morning at the press conference saying that James White should have been the MVP. What a coming out party for James White, you know, former Big Ten player at Wisconsin, had a good college career, trying to find his way in the NFL, finding a place with New England. I thought the kid on a big stage really stepped up and, you know, made Wisconsin proud, because Badger running backs in the NFL, Kevin, have not fared very well. They have great college careers, but they don't really fare very well in the NFL. And I thought James White really improved his stock. I mean, he's a third-year player. That rookie contract's going to be coming up soon, and you have a big game on a big stage like this. I think he just cashed in.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think that coming into the season, you know, you obviously had Deion Lewis as New England's third down back, and James White, to this point, was Deion Lewis's backup as a third down back and a pass-catching back. And so, you know, coming into this year, you're James White, and you're a backup third down back, you know, and now 1 year later, Deion Lewis, you know, gets hurt, and so he's out for, I don't remember exactly how long, but it was something, you know, 10 or so games. So Deion Lewis was fully healthy, and he had 6 carries in the game, got a catch, so it's not as though he was hurt. It's not as though he fumbled the ball twice and gave opportunity to James White. James White just played better than Deion Lewis. And so, I mean, going forward, if you're the Patriots, you've got a couple, I think, elite third down backs, pass-catching backs, and James White is one of those. And, you know, to give the Super Bowl MVP to a running back that caught the ball 14 times for 110 yards, which is a Super Bowl record, 14 receptions in the Super Bowl, that's a record, that was done by a running back. And so while Brady obviously should be commended for what he did, the final 23 minutes of the game, your hats have to go off to James White. And he certainly, you know, he had his niche going in, not just to this game, but the season. Again, he was a backup third down back who could catch the ball exceptionally well. But you weren't sure how effective he would be in a full-time role. Well, he certainly proved it in this game on the biggest stage, down by 25 points, against a defense that knows that you're going to be throwing it every play. And he still succeeded, again, setting an NFL record with 14 receptions as a running back. It's just incredible.
Yeah, it definitely was. And on that last run, he showed that he has the grit and a nose to find the goal line. I mean, basically Atlanta knew it was coming there. They actually played pretty well, and Lewis just put his head down and made his run for the goal line. And it's funny, Kevin, because instantly people are saying his knee was down, and I'm thinking to myself, if his knee was down, the ball will be at the 1-inch yard line. They're going to score. I know that people will say, well, they'd have to snap it again and all those things. But, I mean, in all reality, New England was on fire. They had that Falcon team reeling. I had said on the other show I do, the Red Light Sports Ramble, Kevin, that the way the Patriots can win this game is to keep Matt Ryan on the sideline. And they did that. I mean, they literally, even the first half when they were down, they actually won the time possession battle. So that, to me, plays for the whole 60 minutes, because when you control the ball and you're running plays, it's tiring that defense out. It may not be immediately, but you could tell by near the end of that game, that Falcon defense had been on the field forever. And then, when New England got the ball in overtime, I literally said to my wife, I said, New England's going down and scoring, and she was totally against New England in this game. She's like, oh, no, they can't keep this up. I'm like, that Falcon defense is gassed. They are done. They've been on the field way too long. They've been getting carved up in the fourth quarter. They are done. So, what are your thoughts there, Kevin, about the way the Patriots handled the time of possession? And, what are your thoughts on, fatigue of the defense? I think it played into it near the end of that game.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I mentioned before, and you said it, that, how do you stop a top 10 offense of all time? Well, you keep their MVP quarterback off the field. Matt Ryan was 17 to 23 in the game, 284 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. Julio Jones only had 4 catches, but 3 of them were ridiculously, this is why you're going to – some people call you the best wide receiver in the NFL. This is why. These 3 catches are why. And so it wasn't as though Atlanta's offense was playing poorly. They just never had the ball. And on third downs, they didn't perform exceptionally well, so I guess you can knock them on that. But the Patriots are a more experienced team. They have the number 1 defense in the league going in for a reason. So I didn't expect Atlanta to put up, 35, 42, 45 points in this game like some people predicted. People that liked Atlanta in this game liked them a lot. They liked them by double digits for the most part. And I just didn't see Atlanta going up and down the field constantly on this defense, because New England's been here before. You have Bill Belichick. And so you automatically have the coaching advantage, and their defense has done this in the past. Bill Belichick played against that dynamic Rams offense. I don't even remember how long it was, 15, 16 years ago, something like that, back in 2001, I think it was. So he's stopped, all-time great offenses before, and I think that's what New England did here. I think that, running 93 plays, like you said, going to your question, 93 plays against the defense is going to wear out. And so Matt Ryan was off the field. They had 46 plays. New England ran it 93 times. Obviously, Atlanta's defense is going to get gassed eventually. That's what led to the last 23 minutes of the game. So it's crazy how the game played out, and I agree with you that the full game itself wasn't captivating throughout. I automatically think of USC Texas about 10 years ago and that national championship game. That to me is the best game I've ever seen personally. But this one, again, the final 23 minutes of the game, absolutely interesting and exciting. Obviously, overtime in a Super Bowl is going to be exciting and nerve-wracking if you're a fan of either of these teams. But, to me, hats off to the Patriots and the Patriots defense holding Atlanta's offense realistically to 21 points. They give up a pick 6. So that's where 7 of their points came from. And then off a Tom Brady or off a New England turnover, Atlanta had a short field and scored a touchdown. So outside of those, that's how Atlanta got 28 points. They had to go a short distance on one occasion, and then another, their defense scored 7 points. So I think the Patriots defense played exceptionally well, and the offense being able to run 93 plays is ultimately what was the difference in the end.
Yeah, that's a lot of plays. So, we could sit here, Kevin, we could probably take this whole hour. You and I could sit and talk about this game. That's just what you and I do. I'm the old man with a lot of stubborn ways that I talk about. You're the young guy with all this new wave technology and these crazy stats. But we're going to talk basketball now. and we look at the top 25, Kevin, and I'll tell you, it was just upset after upset after upset. If you had a state in your name, if you were like a Kansas State or an Oklahoma State, if you're one of those universities that is a state university, it was a good weekend if you played a top 10 team because they went down like wildfire, Kevin. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Just let you recap the top 10. I mean, there was some interesting games going on. Kansas State, Iowa State, Oklahoma State, all with huge upset wins in the top, not even the top 25, in the top 10. So take it away, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, Gonzaga's undefeated at number one. They were undefeated number one last week. They're undefeated number one this week. To me, they're going to go undefeated going into the NCAA tournament. I think that this Gonzaga team, everyone always makes the case for them and how, you know, they have a 29-2 record or something going into the tournament, and they just blast everyone throughout the year. But in the start of the year, when you play those non-conference games, they'll play a Kentucky or they'll play an Arizona and they'll lose. But this year they played Arizona and they won. And so I think this Gonzaga team has a leader at point guard. Mark Few's called him the best leader that he's ever coached. Nigel Williams-Goss is a transfer. And so I think Gonzaga has that leadership this year. I think they have the bigs this year. They've got one NBA body. He's a freshman in Collins down low. He's a legitimate force. He's going to be in the NBA. And then they've got Karnowski, a 7-footer who just basically dominates everyone that's smaller than him. And so this Gonzaga team, they've got length. They play real defense. They've got a leader at point guard. They've got bigs. They've got an NBA player. So it's not as though they're just, you know, crushing teams on their system. They've got legitimate players. They're going, to me, in my eyes, they're going to stay number one the rest of the year because they're not going to lose another game, at least up until the NCAA tournament. But the rest of this top 10, I mean, you know, Villanova's lost twice. They lost to Marquette a week or two ago. They obviously did fine. Kansas, they beat Baylor. To me, going into this week, this past week, Baylor was seen as a 1 seed, and to me, I didn't necessarily see them that high. You know, obviously they were, I think, 19-2 or 20-2 going into the week, so, you know, fully deserving of having that number 1 seed next to their name if the tournament started, you know, tomorrow. But then they go to Kansas, they lose. So hats off to Kansas winning that game. I think Kansas is absolutely the more talented team. I think Baylor has a great 2-3 zone, as always, but they just need consistent scoring. That's Baylor's history for the last 10 years with Scott Drew, is that they've got athletes and they've got a great lengthy 2-3 zone, but they just don't have the offense on a consistent basis. That proved to be the case against Kansas. But then Kansas lost at home, and that snapped it was either a 50 or 51 game winning streak. So the next best home court advantage as far as winning streaks go is now with Oregon. So Kansas had a huge win. They lost. They stick with their number 3 spot. Louisville just keeps on winning. They're looking really good at number 4. Oregon, to me, that was, you know, number 6 is Baylor. Talked about them. But number 5, Oregon, they played, I think, the best team in the country in Arizona this past week, and Oregon now has the longest win streak in the country at home. That's at something like 38, some number like that. It's not the exact number, but around that range. Oregon at home against Arizona. Again, I think Arizona's the best team. But Oregon played, I think, the best half that I've probably ever seen in a college game. I'm a Duke fan, and Duke played Arizona in the NCAA tournament. It was around 10 years ago, and Arizona just completely dominated Duke. It was the most dominant half of basketball I've ever seen, and they obviously went on to win and beat Duke. But Oregon had the same type of half and eventually game. I think they shot like 68% from the field. They were like 16 of 20 from 3 at one point. So they were up like 30 points on Arizona this past week at home, and they absolutely buried them. So that's why Oregon jumped into the top 5. Got an absolutely enormous win, and they played basically perfect basketball. They were one player was 6 of 6 from 3 to start the game, put it that way. So talked about Baylor at number 6, Wisconsin at number 7. We'll obviously get into them, but Wisconsin just keeps winning. I know you're intrigued about a Wisconsin game coming up this week. I was looking at the Northwestern game, but they play Nebraska as well, and so we're going to get into Wisconsin's schedule coming up this week. But all Wisconsin does is win. They beat Illinois on the road by 14, then they beat Indiana at home by 5. But they're winning, and they vaulted into the top 10 at number 7. North Carolina's at number 8. Arizona, team I love, fell to number 9 after getting destroyed by Oregon, and then you got UCLA at number 10. Obviously a complete offensive juggernaut with Lonzo Ball at point guard, and then they've got shooters and bigs, and extremely fun team to watch offensively, but defensively it seems as though they give up 80 a game and they score 90 a game. So they're 21-3, but when they play elite competition, it's a game in the 90s, so it's fun to watch, but you have to be on the edge of your seat because UCLA is not playing defense against those elite teams either. But the 2 other quick points I wanted to make was that this past week, only 4 teams in the top 10 from a week ago didn't lose, and 2 weeks ago, only 2 teams in the top 10 didn't lose. So this top 10 is getting jumbled week in and week out with Gonzaga staying at the top, I think, from here on out. So moves can be made. Wisconsin went up to 7. We were talking a week or 2 ago about how, the top team in the Big Ten is ranked 16th, 17th in the country. Now you've got Wisconsin in the top 10 at 7 because of all these upsets happening. So, I said earlier in the year that I think the top 20 kind of separates themselves in terms of talent this year because no mid-majors are that great. But maybe I was wrong in thinking that the top 20 has, kind of separated themselves. Maybe it's just that there's no dominant team in college basketball because the top 10 keeps getting jumbled week in and week out. Like I said, 2 weeks ago, 2 teams in the top 10 didn't lose. This past week, 4 teams didn't lose. So you're getting more teams losing in the top 10 than you're getting winning on a weekly basis.
It is pretty amazing, Kevin. You look at it, and you look at this past week in college basketball, and Kansas takes down Baylor. What a great game. Kansas, here they go. And then Iowa State takes down Kansas. So you're looking at it from a standpoint of, is there that dominant team? And I know Gonzaga is undefeated, Kevin. And I also look at the conference they play in, and I know that, being undefeated, you still have to play. You have to take care of business. I know they have a good team, though. The thing with that, when you look at it, is do they have the talent? Can they sustain it for a tournament run? We'll see. I like Gonzaga. I think they're a good team. But I also look at some of these other teams that are playing different competition. And, but again, you never apologize for winning, and that's all Gonzaga's doing. And the same thing with Wisconsin. Do I think they're the 7th best team in the country? No. But they don't falter. I mean, yeah, Indiana took them to overtime, and, it could have been people's called an upset. But, Wisconsin, they are taking care of business. But like I mentioned to you while we were doing our pre-show, there's just something, and I mentioned it now a couple of times. Wisconsin, it just seems to me like they're going through the motions. But I want to get your quick thought on this with Wisconsin, since we brought them up being in the top 10. It seems like Ethan Happ has risen from the dead. Ethan Happ is starting to play some really good basketball, Kevin, here in the last couple of games. And I think that might be key moving down the stretch. Do you think with Happ playing better that will raise the level of play for Nigel Hayes and Bronson Cannon?
I think it definitely helps. I think any time that you get one of your big 3, so to say, for Wisconsin with Happ, Koenig, and Hayes, when you get one of those players, any player on any team, when they get going and they get on fire and other teams start keying on that player, it just opens up the floor for everyone else. There's a high school team in Wisconsin that I freelance right from down here in Florida. I call the coach every weekend, and we go over the games and the schedule and what happened. And, I freelance right for 3 newspapers up in Wisconsin, and one team just got its star player back, and now it's opening up the floor for everyone else. And I think that, with Happ being a big, if you throw it into him and he's dominant in the post and teams start having to double, and then you find, Hayes open on the outside, you find Koenig open on the outside, Showalter, and any of these guys, that shoot a solid percentage, if you're getting a wide open three in college basketball, it's more likely to go in. And so, throwing the ball into Hap and him doing work, if teams have the ability to play him one-on-one, that's great. You're playing an elite team at that point. If not, Hap's going to go to work down in the block, or you're going to have to double. You're going to have to sacrifice your defense, to compensate for that. And it just frees up open guys on the outside. It frees up driving lanes for guards because they're going to have that extra step in their favor because defenders aren't latched onto them. So for Wisconsin, as long as Hap keeps playing at this pace, Wisconsin could realistically run the table the rest of the way in the Big Ten because, at this point, I think it's safe to say, and I'm curious what you think, that the top three teams have kind of made their, I can't think of the word, but they have basically taken themselves, and you can put a cut in the Big Ten standings, and you look at Wisconsin on top, Maryland in second, Purdue at third, and then you get teams like Northwestern, Michigan State, Iowa, Indiana. There's that difference. There's a difference when Purdue plays Northwestern this past week, and we'll talk about it, but Purdue played Northwestern and won by 21 points. So I think the differential is there in the Big Ten in that there's the top three in Wisconsin, Maryland, and Purdue that, if they made the Elite Eight, you wouldn't be shocked. At the same time, you're not expecting any of these teams to probably make a Final Four based on the talent that they have compared to the rest of the country, but they're obviously really strong teams who can beat just about anybody on any given night. So I think it's the top three, and then there's the rest in the Big Ten. I think that, you're not expecting a Northwestern or a Michigan State this year to make an Elite Eight. Those top three teams can push anyone else in the country.
I agree, and I think they've solidified their position near the top. Now, will it roll out that way, Wisconsin, Maryland, Purdue, the way it stands now? I don't know. There's some big games coming up here at the end of the season. But definitely, Kevin, that Northwestern, like you said, we'll talk about it. This is a team where I've said on the show, and you like to rip me about it, but it's that show-me game. And they certainly didn't show me anything against Purdue. So we'll talk a little more in depth about that in a little bit. But you know what? As the youngster and all your technology and all your, social savvy that you got going on out there, and you talk about Joe Lunardi's bracketology. Well, Kevin, I actually went and checked it out this week. I checked out the bracketology from Joe Lunardi, and it sparked our Twitter poll for this week. So I want to move into the Twitter poll segment of the show. Last week on Twitter, and make sure you go follow us at TroyRobert967, at Kid Cunny. Our Twitter poll last week, Kevin, was, can Northwestern win the Big Ten regular season title? 78% said no. 22% said yes. I think they were on to something, those 78% of people. I will cast and I will reveal my vote. I voted no. And again, you look at it, they had a game, and we'll talk about the game a little bit more, but they just got demolished by Purdue, 80-59. And like I said, Northwestern needs to show me something, and it's not necessarily a W. W's would be nice. But when you're beating other teams that are below you in this conference this year, it's not going to turn my head to be a believer. I need you to play the big guns. And when they played Purdue, the big gun, they just got smoked, Kevin. So the like-me meter at Northwestern, last week it went up a little bit. This week it went back down a little bit. It's going back toward the empty side of the gauge because they totally, and then I have no idea where this phrase came from, but they pooed the bed. They had a great opportunity, and they just pooed the bed against Purdue. So before I get your thoughts on that, I want to let listeners know what this week's Twitter poll is because I had segued this with Joe Lunardi's bracketology. The Twitter poll this week will be, how many Big Ten teams do you think will make the NCAA tournament? Currently, we have 7 teams, Kevin, that are in his bracket, Wisconsin being the highest seed at a 4, and like you said, Indiana at the play-in game as an 11 seed. So that is our Twitter poll. Go find us at TroyRobert967, at Kid Cunny. Then turn it back over to the youngster to touch on a few things here. We can get into Northwestern, Purdue. That really losing to Purdue, I know they only have 3 losses in the conference, but the way they played against Purdue, I think they have no shot of winning the Big Ten regular season title. So you can answer that question, and then we'll go to the bracketology. We got 7 teams currently in the Big Ten. How many teams do you think will make the Big Ten? I'll put the poll question on a little bit later tonight. Honestly, Kevin, I'm seeing 5 right now that I think are solid. That could be solid tournament teams. If they want to go to 7, fine, but I'm seeing 5. And I'm seeing 3, like you said, that can make a run in the tournament. Not necessarily a Final Four, but 3 that can advance a round or 2. But I think there's 5 overall that would be in the tournament if I was picking. Because below 5, I don't see much at all other than just a roadblock of mediocre teams. So I'm going to turn it back over to you. First, on Northwestern, Purdue, Northwestern's chances of winning the Big Ten, and then let's talk about the NCAA tournament, Big Ten, how many teams should get in?
Well, I mean, like you mentioned, Purdue beat Northwestern 80-59, and it's at Purdue. And so you mentioned, hey, where are these show-me wins? And to this point, Northwestern didn't have one, and they went to Purdue. And so you're expecting a top 25 team to play on the road at another top, 20 team, top 25 team. Purdue at that point was ranked 23rd. Now they're at 16. And I think that's about, where Purdue is at. I like Purdue a lot this year. I've said in the past that they're my favorite Big Ten team this season because of their bigs and Haas and Swanigan, and then their shooting ability outside from their guards, albeit they're young guards. But so you don't expect Northwestern to win at Purdue, and you mentioned that, and I think you hit it on the head that, last week I said that Purdue would not only beat Northwestern, but they would beat Maryland, and that's what they did this week because, I like this Purdue team this year. But so you don't expect Northwestern to go into Purdue and win, but you don't expect Northwestern to go into Purdue and lose by 21 and be down by 22 at halftime. That's what you're not expecting. And so the one exception to all of this talk about Northwestern, dropping out of the top 25 now because it was such a remarkable story that they were, ranked 25th in the country and how they're a lock for the NCAA tournament and, for the first time in school history, which is crazy to think about. But so they were 7-2 in conference, and then they go to Purdue and lose by 21. But so the one thing I wanted to point out was that Scotty Lindsey, their top scorer, didn't play in this game. And so I think for any top 25 team, especially toward the back end of the top 25, there are teams that have 3-4 guys who, make up the bulk of their scoring. There are teams that have one superstar, and then the other players kind of fill out, the stat sheet around them, and, it's the Melo Trimble show, and then the rest of the team, to use a Big Ten example. And, Scotty Lindsey, he's not that type level of player, and so you can't point a 21-point loss on him, staying at home with the flu and missing the game all on that. You still want Northwestern to be able to compete on the road despite having their number one scorer out. So I completely agree with you that, I liked Northwestern going into this week, but I expected Purdue to win. I expected Scotty Lindsey to play, of course, but I still expected a loss from Northwestern, and that's what happened, but they got obliterated. So I don't think that they would have won with Scotty Lindsey. I don't think that this game would have come down to the wire if Lindsey were healthy and playing. I just don't think that would have been the case. I don't think he would have made that big a difference because Purdue was just completely clicking on all cylinders, and Swanigan had 24 points, 16 rebounds. He eventually fouled out, but Purdue was hitting from the outside, and that was, kind of the difference was they made 12 of 23 threes, and Northwestern shot 2 of 14 from 3. So, when you're making 10 more threes than your opponent, that's a plus 30. You winning by 21, it makes sense. The plus 30 from the three-point line is going to be the difference maker. So Scotty Lindsey being healthy, I don't think changes that drastically. Purdue out-rebounding Northwestern 41-30. Purdue, again, has elite bigs, and you have to be a Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, Gonzaga to play with these Purdue bigs. That's why I like them so much. And if you have to double the bigs, then you're kicking it out to guards like Carson Edwards. And, albeit being a freshman, he can shoot the three. Vince Edwards can shoot the three as well. Matthias made a couple threes in this game against Northwestern. So Purdue's got shooters on the outside. They've got obviously an elite front court in Swanigan and Haas. And so I just like Purdue going forward. I was not surprised that Purdue won. Obviously Lindsey being out kind of helped the 21-point differential there. But you expect Northwestern to show you a little something, show you a fight, show you that you're not going to be down 45-23 at halftime, So Northwestern didn't impress me like you were saying. And Northwestern going forward, obviously Northwestern, I don't think they can win the Big Ten at this point. They're 2 games behind Wisconsin in the standings. They're a game behind Maryland. They're half a game behind Purdue, but obviously Purdue holds the tiebreaker. So that's, winning the Big Ten is out of the question. Like we said earlier in the show, I think the top 3 in Wisconsin, Maryland, and Purdue have separated themselves. I guess that's the word I was looking for. I'm not sure why I couldn't think of the word separate, but the top 3 in the Big Ten has separated themselves from the rest in both of our opinions, it sounds like. So Northwestern, they're obviously not winning the Big Ten. Northwestern was a 7 seed going into this week, according to Joe Lunardi, which I'm very proud to get you on board with checking out that bracket. I appreciate that greatly. And so, kidding aside, Northwestern's still a 7 seed, according to Lunardi. It didn't hurt them at all. Even if it did, and say they're an 8 seed or a 9 seed now, they're still, pretty comfortably in the tournament. So Northwestern's going to get in. It was just interesting to see them play a top-flight Big Ten team on the road without their best player, seeing how you're going to do, and they lost by 21. So they were out of it by halftime. It realistically wasn't even a 21-point game. I think that's closer than what the game realistically was. So Northwestern kind of let people down in that regard. They're not, the best team in the Big Ten. They're not on the same level as Purdue, Maryland, and Wisconsin. I think we kind of knew that going in, but we didn't have a game to kind of point to it. They still have to go to Wisconsin. They still have to play Maryland. They still have to play Purdue at home. So all 4 of those games, or 3 of those games, will be interesting going forward. But top 3 in the Big Ten have separated themselves. And you mentioned as well, how many Big Ten teams are going to get in. You counted 5, and I completely agree with you that Wisconsin, Maryland, Purdue, then you get Northwestern and Michigan State in there. And then, like you said, it's a bunch of teams that are middle of the road. You got Iowa winning 3 straight, so they're kind of in the mix now at least. They're getting some bubble talk at 6-5 in Big Ten play, but they're only 14-10 overall. So Iowa still has a lot of work to do. Indiana was a 7 seed 2 weeks ago. Then they were a 9 seed according to Lunardi last week, and now they're an 11 seed playing in the play-in game. Last week I said that, I figured out that Indiana's not going to make the tournament. Just looking on their schedule, seeing that Blackman's hurt, seeing that another one of their guards in OG was out for the rest of the season. So Indiana, to me, was dead at that point. I didn't think they were going to come back from it, and their slide continues, losing at Wisconsin. So I ultimately see 5 teams as well. Minnesota's got to do some work. They're 16-7 overall, which is great. Not great, but it's certainly tournament worthy if projected out for the next 10 or so games. But they're 4-6 in conference, so that's what's kind of holding Minnesota back in my mind and reaching the tournament. If you go in 6-10 in Big Ten play, whether you're 19-11 or not, 6-10 in the Big Ten this year isn't fantastic at all. 6-10 in any conference isn't great. So they need to play well. Iowa needs to play well. Indiana needs to play well without Blackman. So I'm kind of with you that at this point I see 5 teams in. A week ago, Lunardi said that the Big Ten is going to get 8 teams in. That was the second most of any conference, only behind the ACC. No other conference had 8 teams. ACC had 10. Obviously, the ACC is loaded. But this week now the Big Ten is down to 7 teams, and Indiana's fighting in a play-in game, to put the Big Ten at 7 teams. Now the Big 12 has 7 teams as well. The Big East is there with 6. So I think this number is going to keep dwindling. I don't think Minnesota's a fantastic team. I think they need to beat the teams that they have to beat, and they need to steal a win or two, in my opinion, to kind of lock themselves in. And Indiana, to me, they're just on the outside looking in going forward because of their injuries, unfortunately. I think, without their injuries, they're absolutely a tournament team, no doubt. But when you've got 2 of your best players out for the rest of the season, or Blackman's not out for the rest of the season, but out for a substantial amount of time, it's just going to be too little too late, because at this point, being a play-in team and still losing games, it's not boding well. Like I said, 2 weeks ago they were a 7 seed completely in the tournament. This week they're an 11 in the play-in game. I don't think Indiana's going to make the tournament still. And the Big Ten at this point, 5 teams going forward in the tournament, I think I'm with you. What do you think?
Yeah, it doesn't get any easier for Indiana. Like you said, the injury bugaboo. I mean, that can really derail a season. And when you look at it, they have their next game is Purdue. I know it's a home game, but Purdue's a good team. And I don't see, you look at the matchups, and I know that, you look at it and say, well, Indiana against Penn State scored 110 points. Well, it's Penn State. I mean, come on now. You only put up 60 against Wisconsin, which is normal. Most teams only put up 60 against Wisconsin. But you also need overtime to do that. Now you're playing Purdue, and like you said, I like the bigs, and they got guards that can shoot. Indiana could be in for a world of hurt for that game. Then all of a sudden that gives them another loss. Then they have to go to Minnesota. Or they got Michigan, then at Minnesota. So you look at this 3-game stretch for Indiana, Kevin. Purdue, I'm going to chalk it up. I'm not going to write it in pen, but I'm going to chalk it up to Purdue. And then you have a Michigan team that comes to Indiana, but that's Indiana-Michigan. That's a rival game. Michigan, that's one of those games that can go either way. And so if they lose that one, and I talked about this last week, Kevin, I looked at Indiana's schedule, and I know that last week Joe Lunardi had them at a 7, but I said, you're looking at the schedule, and this is a team that could finish well below 500 in the Big Ten. So if they drop to Purdue, that puts them at 5-7. They drop to Michigan, they're 5-8. Then they have to go to at Minnesota, which is another one of those games that could go either way, because Lunardi has Minnesota in as a 10 seed. And so you're looking at an Indiana team with injury and not playing really well. In the next 3 games, they could be at 5-9 in the Big Ten and 15-12 overall. To me, that is nowhere near being eligible for the tournament. And I really think what you're going to see happen here, Kevin, and the reason I'm with 5 teams, I'm not saying that in Iowa and Indiana or Minnesota are teams that they're not, you're not tournament worthy. I think what's going to happen is there are teams right now that have some issues. They're going to be beating each other up over the next 3-4 weeks, and record-wise and standing-wise, they're going to hurt each other. That's what I see happening, because those teams are in that roadblock, and they're going to hurt each other moving forward. So that's my thought when you look at it from that standpoint. Now, I do got to give props to the Rutgers team, Kevin. As everybody knows that listens to this show, I know they're last place in the Big Ten, Kevin, but Rutgers got another win. Illinois better watch out. Illinois is 3-8. Rutgers is 2-9. We got to give love to the bottom dwellers. We got to give love to the bottom dweller teams, because Rutgers now 2-9, 13-11, and I look on their schedule, Kevin, and I know I said I didn't see very many wins down there, but when you look at this Rutgers team, they got a win against Penn State, which is a formidable team, and now they've got an Ohio State team, and they got to play Illinois at the end of the year. Rutgers could get to that 4-win mark, and I don't know where Illinois is going to get their win. But joking aside, I had to give love to the bottom dwellers. I want to look ahead, Kevin, to next week, and I'm looking at the time going, holy cow, you and I just went through another hour just like that. Unbelievable. There's a must-watch game in my book, and I'll get your must-watch game, and I won't give my result, but I think, you look at a must-watch game this week in the Big Ten, and I think it's that Northwestern-Wisconsin game on Sunday. What do you think?
I would agree with you. I think, Northwestern at Wisconsin, there's not a lot of Big Ten action. A week ago there was probably 5 or 6 games that I was really intrigued on seeing a week ago. This week going forward, I don't think it's the case. Indiana getting Purdue at home on Thursday, I think that's something that could be interesting because Indiana's at home. If Indiana were on the road, I think they lose by 25 points. But being at home, maybe they have some miracle shot in beating Purdue. It'll catch my eye. It's not something I'm drastically watching, second to second. But Northwestern at Wisconsin Sunday, I agree with you. That's the one game that you really want to see. And then there's another game that Wisconsin plays this week outside of Northwestern that has caught your eye. But before I pass it back to you, you mentioned Indiana's schedule and how the next 3 games they could lose to Purdue, Michigan, and Minnesota. After that, the rest of their regular season schedule is at Iowa, a team that's won 3 straight. Then they play Northwestern, who's a team comfortably in the tournament, a solid team, good when Lindsey is healthy. Then they play at Purdue, and then they play at Ohio State. That's the rest of their schedule. So you mentioned Purdue twice, Michigan, at Minnesota, at Iowa, at Purdue, and then Northwestern. Indiana, in my eyes, could lose their last 8 games of the regular season, in my opinion. But passing it back to you, Wisconsin's got another game outside of Northwestern that you wanted to touch on.
Yeah, it's in one of those midweek games. Like you said, schedule-wise, not. I mean, you and I are going to watch Big Ten. We're going to watch the Big Ten Network. We're going to watch the Big Ten games. That's what we do. That's why we do a show. We love Big Ten basketball. Not a lot of must-watch games, though. So it's like, if I'm doing something around the house or I got something for work, come up, I'll walk away from the TV. There's a game this week, Kevin, that has caught my attention. And the reason it's caught my attention is it's a Nebraska team that I talked about, was it last week or 2 weeks ago, that they're a team where sometimes the light switch is on and sometimes the light switch is off. And when the light switch is on, they're a very good team. But when it's off, they're just a terrible team. They play Wisconsin, and the game is at Nebraska. I am going to, on this show, tell you right now the number 7 team in the country, Wisconsin, is going to lose at Nebraska. And it's not because it's not, of course, you cannot call me a hater on Wisconsin, Kevin. I'm from Wisconsin. I am a Badger fan. I watch Badger basketball whenever I can. It's a little bit harder being in the Northeast. Thank God for the Big Ten Network. I had mentioned this on the show today. I've mentioned it prior. I've mentioned it to you not on the show. There's just something about Wisconsin. And I look back to the last game. We just talked about Indiana and the injury bugaboo that has hit them. This is a team that they had to take to overtime to win. And the top 3, the big 3 as we'll call them, Koenig, Hayes, and Happ, have not been impressing. It's a team that I think is going through the motions, and when you do that, if you go to a team that's hot and a team that turns it on, I think that could be Nebraska this week at home. They really have nothing, and at this point, Kevin, unless you want to correct me, Nebraska has nothing more to play for than an NIT bid if they can even get that. They're 10-13 overall. They're 4-7 in the Big Ten. A win. I mean, they literally looked at their schedule. Their postseason tournament opportunities are pretty much by the wayside. They have nothing to play for. Those are the teams and the games that scare me the most. What does Nebraska have to lose other than going out and knocking off Goliath at the top of the conference? If this game was at Wisconsin, I wouldn't even be talking like this. Wisconsin has to travel to a Nebraska team with nothing to play for other than pride and other than saying we knocked Goliath off the mountain. So you probably disagree with me 100%, and that's okay. It's just something about this game that's scaring me if you're a Wisconsin Badger fan, that it's one of those games where you could be overlooking this Nebraska team before Northwestern, because that Northwestern game is a big game. And so is Wisconsin looking ahead to Northwestern and just thinking, well, we're going to go to Nebraska, we're going to go through the motions like we have been, we'll go to Nebraska, we'll get a W, and then we'll prepare for Northwestern on a big game on a Sunday afternoon. That scares me, Kevin. I think Nebraska takes down Wisconsin. Your thoughts?
I think Nebraska wins by 25. I'm kidding. I think Wisconsin beats Nebraska. Unfortunately, I can't jump on your bandwagon here. Not that you're jumping on Nebraska's bandwagon and jumping off Wisconsin's. Obviously, like you mentioned, you are a Wisconsin fan, and you watch Wisconsin football, basketball, cross country. I'm kidding again. But so Wisconsin.
Hey, I watch the Big Ten Network, Kevin. They have cross country on there. They have indoor track and field on there. They have wrestling on there. I was watching wrestling the other night. I was watching the Penn State-Ohio State wrestling duel, which was actually very good. Yeah, it was awesome. There's actually there was two wrestlers that were actually from the Latrobe Dairy area, and then literally that's the name of the high school, Dairy Area High School, that were wrestling, and it was on, and I watched a lot of that dual meet. So I do watch the Big Ten Network. That's why I love doing the show. Go big or go home. That's what we do. We watch the Big Ten Network. I knew you were kidding when you say Nebraska wins by 25. I didn't expect you to think that my prediction, for you to even agree with me. I actually like that you disagree with me. Just, again, personally, it's something about this game that scares me. I want you to tell me why that's not going to happen.
Well, I think that, part of the reasons why upsets happen, especially when you play 30 games in a regular season, obviously baseball upsets happen constantly because there's 162 games, and basketball there's 82, and so you get upsets pretty frequently. It's not uncommon for the Cavs to lose to the Knicks on a random Wednesday night, or the Warriors to lose to whoever. And so college basketball, you get 30 games, and Nebraska's at home, like you mentioned, perfectly set up for Nebraska to not care about the rest of the season and to care about this one game, the one ranked team that they have left on their schedule. So it's not even as though they have to look forward to playing, at Purdue or getting Maryland at home. This is literally it. They played at Iowa Sunday, then they come home after a loss. And it's, okay, what's next on the schedule? Well, we get Wisconsin, the number 7 team in the country, at home. And so everyone that cares about Nebraska basketball is going to watch. Anyone that understands Big Ten basketball and is a Wisconsin fan will watch, because it's Wisconsin, and Nebraska has beaten Purdue and Iowa and Maryland and Indiana when they were healthy earlier this season. So like you said, when the switch is on, Nebraska is on, and they can absolutely beat Wisconsin. But diving deeper into this game, and all it takes is talent. And so I was saying, to start my argument, that upsets happen frequently, but for Wisconsin, if you look at their schedule, they played Indiana on Sunday at home, and they're comfortable, and then they get Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday to prepare for Nebraska. And then they get Northwestern 3 days later. So it's not as though that it's so conflicting that you've got a back-to-back, or that you've got, this 6-game road stretch. It's, you're coming on the road for your one road game. You have to step up. Nebraska can take down Goliath in the Big Ten. They've done it, 3 times before this season. So I think Wisconsin is well coached enough. I think they're disciplined enough. I think that Happ is playing well enough. I agree with you that Wisconsin's somewhat going through the motions and that their wins aren't all that impressive. But I think Wisconsin is disciplined enough to take this one road game against a team that has nothing to lose, and the coach will tell Wisconsin about it, and how Nebraska's won huge Big Ten games before already this season, so that Wisconsin will be at least on guard. It's not Rutgers. They're not going to score 45 points in regulation against Nebraska. The talent will prevail. The coaching will prevail. And Wisconsin will take this one road game this week and care about it, because there's 4 days in between games since their last game, and then they've got 3 days in between their next game. So I think they'll take it in stride and beat Nebraska by 15 points.
Well, thank you for saying that to me as a Badger fan. But as the host or co-host of this show, still sticking to my guns. still sticking to the big upset. So we'll see if I'm a total doofus and making much ado of nothing. And then if that happens, I will give my praises to the youngster Kevin Cunningham live on the air next week. And, you know, as I say that, Kevin, we've went well over our hour today, and it's crazy because we were talking in the pre-show, and I knew the recording time. But you know what? I have so much fun doing this. You and I could do this probably for 2-3 more hours. I hope the listeners like it, though. I mean, because that at the end of the day would be the big thing, is that the listeners definitely like what's going on, right?
Exactly. It's all about the fans, but at the same time, like you mentioned earlier, that we could talk for hours about the Super Bowl, we could talk for hours about Big Ten basketball, and apparently we can talk about Big Ten wrestling as well.
Well, we could. And, you know, let's do this, Kevin. We got a Twitter poll out there. The new Twitter poll is how many teams will the Big Ten get in the tournament? So go find us on Twitter, at TroyRobert967, at Kid Cunny, and also then interact with us. Tell us what you want us to talk about. Yes, it's basketball right now, Kevin, because basketball is king in the Big Ten. But if there are fans out there that listen in and they see Go Big or Go Home, if you want to talk about Big Ten wrestling or Big Ten hockey or Big Ten, like you said, cross country, we may have to do some shuffling and some quick looking. But I know that Kevin watches the Big Ten channel. I watch the Big Ten channel. We know the schools. We know the stuff. But if there's something you want us to talk about, find us on Twitter, at TroyRobert967, at Kid Cunny. Let us know what you want us to talk about. This is your show. Because Kevin and I can talk about anything. We could probably talk about this deer I see across in the field here for the next 20 minutes, Kevin, when I'm looking out my office window. We would find a way to converse about it and make it interesting. So we're not going to, but do you have any last words for the listeners out there today?
No, I mean, like you said, participate in the Twitter poll, and I have a favorite radio show host that I won't name because I'll get flamed for it, but he always says that this show that he does is based on his listeners and what they ultimately want to listen to on the way to work or, you know, during their lunch break. And so it's a listener-based show, and ultimately we have talked about basketball primarily to this point because Big Ten football season is over. Big Ten basketball is king right now. It's what the majority wants. But, again, contact us on Twitter. Participate in our polls. Let us know if you want to talk about Big Ten wrestling. I think Ohio State had a wrestler that participated in the most recent Olympics. So it's not as though, you know, Big Ten wrestling is a laughing stock. There are serious teams and there are Olympians to be competing. So it's something interesting to talk about. And if you want us to talk about it, we can. But so, like my favorite radio show host says, he's not going to give you the anchovies, and his radio show is a grocery store that doesn't consist of anchovies and pineapple and, you know, orange grapes. It consists of the bread and the milk and the eggs, and that's what this show is we want to talk about what is interesting to you and what gets the listeners active, because we can talk about anything. And so right now, Big Ten basketball is king. That's what we focus on. We talked about the Super Bowl for 20 minutes. We talked about the Big Ten players in that, but it's the Super Bowl. It gets conversations going. It gets sparks flying. It gets everything going. And so we care about the Super Bowl just like you guys do. We care about Big Ten basketball just like you guys do. But ultimately, it's for the fans, listeners of the show. Just contact us on Twitter. Let us know what you want us to talk about. We'll talk about it because we want the listeners to be here. It's fun talking back and forth between two people, but it's even more fun when we've got thousands of people commenting and listening to the show, which we can see how many people are listening to the show. We're happy with it. We just want more conversation from you guys. So if you want us to talk about more Big Ten basketball, that's what we'll do. If we'll talk about more deer hunting, we can do that as well.
Okay. I mean, it's not hunting season as far as I know. I'm not a deer hunter, but hey, deer is now gone. The deer probably heard me talking about him, and this is what I'm talking about. We can take one comment and turn it into a conversation. So as Kevin eloquently put it in his words, find us on Twitter, TroyRobert967, at Kid Cunny, and let us know what you want us to talk about. Another show in the wraps, Kevin. And so, again, our Twitter poll this week, how many teams from the Big Ten will get into the tournament? Go find us on Twitter and vote on that poll. Kevin and I will come back at you next week. Go big or go home. Have a great week, everyone.